welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Taylor and today will be my August reading wrap up. But before I hop in the video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you love all things books. So far, this was my best reading month of the year in terms of quantity and quality because I had a lot of 5 stars. I don't know if it was just because I was in good moods, the vibes were vibing, I don't know. But I also read 11 books, which is 2 more than my other best month, which was last month where I read 9. So going through the stats, according to this, I read 11 books, 3,911 pages, and my top reading moods were emotional, lighthearted, and funny, obviously. Mostly read medium-paced books, and most of the books I read were between 300 to 499 pages, and 18% of what I read was nonfiction, 82% was fiction. I got back on my nonfiction grind this month, which you will see. And then I read 6 romances, 5 queer books, and then the rest were like contemporary, young adult, and fantasy were the next 2 after that. And then my average rating for the month was a 4.58. I actually did have one fall into the 3-star range this month, which was a bit unfortunate because I think if you know me or know anything, any book that falls under 4 stars has to really do something or not do something that really irritates me to get there. So I will talk about that. And I did vlog reading, I think, a lot of these books this month. So I will point to the vlogs when I get to those. So without further ado, let's hop into the wrap-up. The first book I read and finished this month was Cross the Line by Simone Soltani. This is her debut F1 racing romance. So so it's Deb and Willow. I'm just going to say this. I can remember the plot of an entire book, but trying to remember character names, now that's a task for me. But essentially, this book is brother's best friend. She's been in love with him her whole life, etc., forced proximity, and all of those good things. So we're following Willow, who recently finished her bachelor's degree and is on the hunt for a sports marketing job. And while she's on this hunt, her brother invites her to go visit their friend Deb, who's an F1 racer, during the opening stretch. And Deb's like, hey, I recently had a fallout with my social media manager. You want to work for me? And she's like, okay, but just, things have happened between us. We kind of need to keep it professional. He's like, sure. They don't keep it professional. They end up, spending their time together and romance and sparks fly from there. So I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. For a debut novel, it was solid. Do I think it maybe was a little long for a debut novel? Maybe. At least for a romance novel. And I will say this book, the main thing about this book, and I said this in my review and the reading vlog that I had it, the epilogue really took a twist and went, woo! I was like, well, didn't expect that to happen when I picked up the epilogue. So when you read it, just keep that in mind. Also, I was reading this whole book thinking, oh, so this is interconnected standalone. We're going to be following the brothers and the friends and everything. No, apparently we're following the other F1 drivers who are mentioned in the series, which I guess is interesting, but we just didn't spend a lot of time with them throughout this book. So maybe we'll see how that works out, because I saw who the next book is going to be about, and I'm like, that's going to be interesting. I also we have 2 biracial main characters. One is half black, one is half Indian, and our FMC here struggles with chronic pain, hypermobility, so if that is something you're looking for, this one is for you. Then I read You Had Me at Happy Hour by Timothy Janofsky. I have this man's entire backlist except for, I think, his Christmas novel, and I read 1, which I absolutely loved last year, and then I kept buying them, and I just never ended up picking up them again. So this is his newest release. It came out, it might have come out last month or just before last month. This is a queer romance between sommelier Julian and bartender or mixologist Greg. So Greg is a TikTok star who's recently fallen some financial hardships. So he's moving to a town that's hiring them to spruce up the business's image. And when he arrives, he meets Julian, who is a very closed off, not very sociable sommelier. All he wants in life is to get a sommelier license and move out of town. So they start out with a rocky friendship, but then they are tasked by the owner of the restaurant, Julian's uncle, to plan these happy hours. And through that, they grow a friendship, then eventually a friends with benefits, and so forth and so on. Both of these characters do deal with mental health struggles, so do keep that in mind when you are reading this, in case that is something, you need to know. And yeah, this one was very good. It was 4.75. Now, I gave Never Been Kissed a 4.75, loved that book. This one, 4.75. I have yet to meet one. I love the books I've read by him, but I've yet to meet a 5-star. This one, I can't remember what I said was keeping me back from the 5-star, other than maybe just like not getting the 5-star feelings. But you know what? This one was spicy. This was fun. It was a quick little read. Highly recommend. I listened to the book or the audiobook for All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a young adult memoir following George's life growing up Black and queer and his experiences from like his early childhood, his teenage life up to around his 30s when he completed this book. I don't rate nonfiction, so I'm not going to give it a rating. Obviously, I'm not going to rate someone's, life, personal experience. How can I tell you how to write your own personal life? But this one's very good. I did cry listening to it sometimes. The middle section, focusing on his, family. As an older sister, his letter to his little brother really had me. And yeah, it's a good one to add to your queer history, queer nonfiction collection. I'll do a whole video in October for, Queer Pride or Pride History Month in the US on all these queer nonfiction. So look out for that video, but do recommend. Next, I finally finished because I started it in July. One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. This is a standalone adult fantasy that's inspired by Romeo and Juliet as well as the Baba Yaga story. I'm not as familiar with Baba Yaga, but there is a lot of Romeo and Juliet within this story, and I did read it on Kindle Unlimited. What you're following is two rival witch families in the boroughs of New York, the Fedorovs and the Antonovas, and you're following a long history of just failed interactions. So you kick off the books with the lead Antonova, Maria Antonova, coming in and threatening Dmitri Fedorov for, trying to impede on their witchy drug operation, and things ensue from there. The odd thing is that I read Romeo and Juliet about it's a decade ago now. Well, we're gonna ignore that moment of, wow, I'm getting older. I read that, knew it was a tragedy, and somehow Act 2 still caught me off guard. I will say this book, so Olivia Blake's writing, so it's been a while since I read the Atlas 6, and I read that with the indie published version, so I don't know what changes I've made to it, but I really would like to see it because I did enjoy the Atlas 6 when I read it. So this is me diving back into Olivia Blake's writing, and I will say her writing is very much so thick. You have to, get through it. There's a lot of, I always say it's kind of like that pretentious style of writing, not to say it's anything bad, but it's writing that you have to really dig into and really get into. It's not quick reading. It definitely is something that you got to slog through a little. So for that, pacing-wise, that's why I give it a 4.5. I think it could have been cut down, maybe edited a little more, But overall, the storyline had me kept. I will say Maria and Dmitri. Okay. I was really thinking, and then Lev Fedorov, him during the first half of the book. Yes, loved. But tell me why I got to the 50% mark of the book and we had only just barely scratched the surface of things that were going on. So that's why it's only a 4.5 and not a 5-star. But the romance, the plot line, everything had me going. I was just like, woo, we keep going and we keep going. So, but yeah, it does make me excited to read more Olivia Blake, and I can't wait to jump back into her work. Then we have That Self-Same Metal. This kicked off a slew of what were 5-star reads this month. Okay, so this book was recommended to me by the author of Legendborn, Tracy Dion, and if you know anything about me, Legendborn was my favorite book of last year. So you're gonna give me another YA, English-inspired fantasy? Yes, give it to me. I'm excited. So this one we're following Joan, who is blessed by the Orisha god Oshun to have, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, to have metal bending powers. She can control metal with her hands. And in the world she's living, it is the early 1600s. She's working for the Shakespearean Theater Company. She is there. Obviously, women aren't allowed on stage at this time, but she is working as essentially the fighting coordinator, the person who keeps up all the swords and everything. And in the world she is living, there is also Fae who lives amongst us, often inspired by Shakespearean plays of the time. And while she is working there, the pact between Fae and humans is broken, and now Fae are running amok amongst the humans. And she is having to fight the Fae King, Queen Fae ruler, Alberon, I can't remember sure how that is. And she's going through essentially fighting a war between him to keep him from, trying to kill her and her family and, all these human citizens around him. And it is a very good story. This book, we have a bisexual FMC. We have what is probably going to Listen, I thought I was coming in here with a love triangle and they hit me with a little polyamory, a little throuple situation. Yes, ma'am. I will say the romance is a little more on the subplot side of things, but it had me. The fight scenes were great. On the back, it says something about like swashbuckling and everything, or maybe it's in here. It says swashbuckling, romantic, and full of the sights and sounds of Shakespeare's London. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just one of those kind of adventures you read that you want to have that just keeps you going. It's fast-paced. Everything is in there. And yeah, the design is also beautiful. Like the design pages inside. Let me see if I can like pull her up. All the chapter titles are here, and it gives you the date of when things are happening, as well as in it there are little interludes. I will say this is a little more gory than I thought it would be. The little interludes involve the Fae doing a little, you know, to some people, so do keep that in mind if you're going to read that. So do check some trigger warnings. Then I read Snowglobe by So Young Park and translated by Jungmin Lee Comfort. Now I did read this physically, but I am unhauling it. This is the book that I gave 3.25 stars this month to. You'll see, and I mentioned this before, I'm in the process of possibly preparing to move, so I'm unhauling books, and this was just a book that I kind of knew that I was never going to read again, and I wasn't going to continue the story, so it's in my unhaul pile right now. So this story is a little bit hard to describe, but so in this dystopian sci-fi world, the entire world is frozen over, and the only place on Earth that isn't frozen over in a temperate climate is the Snowglobe, this enclosed area. And in order to live in Snowglobe, everyone there acts as an actor and essentially gives up all of their privacy in order to be broadcast to everyone around the world and be controlled by these directors in order to have the luxuries and comforts that go with being in Snowglobe. And while living in the outside world in this dark, in the snowy, very cold area, she is asked to come in and fill in for her doppelganger who recently just died. And that's kind of the plot line. She enters the Snowglobe, finds out things are not as they seem. This book, there's a lot of things I could say as to why. Overall, the last third of this book, bravo. The ending, the twist, the plot twist, everything. That's what gave you the 0.25 for me. However, the first 2/3 of this book was spent heavily building up the world without really building up the characters. There were a lot of characters mentioned, and I don't think I really learned too much about their personalities. It gave me a lot to really care about them with, other than maybe the one person narrating. So that meant like when the villain was being like villainous, I was just like, wow, these random acts of violence keep happening. What do you know? So really could have fleshed out our antagonist more. We could have done a whole lot more world building. And then it's just like, there was a lot of things. I think it was a very good idea that really needed some more time to be fleshed out. It was kind of like a little half-baked in my opinion. But it's still a good story. I think maybe if I was younger, I would probably be able to overlook some of those things a little more, because the ending was really good. Like the way that she went with that, and I'm sure starting off the next book, it will be really great. However, it's just like those first 2/3 of a book, I'm like, really not a whole lot going on here situation. So each their own on this. You'll have to read it and give your own opinions, but to me, probably not something I would pick up again. So then I started my Talia Hibbert journey again. If you know me, you would have known that earlier this year I read her YA debut, Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute, and I gave that book 5 stars. So then I started the Brown Sisters trilogy because it was on Kindle Unlimited, and I was like, well, I'm going to take advantage of this while I can, because we're trying not to buy as many like physical books as possible because, moving. So first off, Get a Life, Chloe Brown was the first one I read. This series, I love it. So I'm going to go through all of them successively. So Get a Life, Chloe Brown is the first book in the series, and it's following the oldest Brown sister who is dealing with fibromyalgia and chronic pain, and she recently had a near-death experience that basically said, now I need to go out and get a life. So she moves out on her own for the first time, and in this new building, she runs into the grumpy, building attendant. I don't really remember what the title is, but his name is Red. He's in charge of taking care of the building. They have this animosity in this relationship, and then she starts, becoming friends with him, and, she basically asks him, hey, I have this Get a Life list that's basically all these things I want to do to help me get a life, and he's like, I can help you with that, and, things ensue from there. This book, 5 stars. 5 stars. Second favorite book in the series. We love it. highly recommend. Obviously, check your trigger warnings because Red also deals with a generalized anxiety disorder. Then we have Take a Hint, Dani Brown. This is my third favorite book out of the 3 books. I originally gave it 5 stars, but upon further reflection, I think it's more of a 4.75 stars. So this book, we do have a bisexual FMC in Dani. We love you, girly. She's also a witch. She follows the Orisha, just like the girl in that self-same medal. So the fact that I got that twice in 1 month was very interesting to me to like start learning more about that. So essentially, Dani is a PhD student who is teaching at this university, and while she's in this building where she teaches at, the elevator breaks down during a gas drill. So her friend, who's a security officer, Zafir, goes in, opens the door, carries her out princess style, basically saves her. This princess style moment goes very viral on the internet, and Zafir's like, hey, my charity that I work for is really doing well from all of this publicity. Can we fake date and then maybe eventually break up so that I can capitalize on this publicity? And Dani's like, sure. And feelings ensue from there. Obviously, both of these characters are dealing with some things going on in their life, particularly Zafir, who's dealing with grief, loss of loved ones, and clinical anxiety. So be conscious of that. I think the only reason this one isn't a 5-star to me, and it could be what I was feeling at the time, I think this one just ran a little long for me. So pacing probably on this one. I really kept going like I want bump, and it didn't really necessarily happen. But we love it. She's cute. I also have to mention all of these Brown sisters are curvy girlies, so if you're looking for a good plus size romance, do pick that up. Then lastly, we have Act Your Age, Eve Brown, which is the last book I finished this month, but it's not the last book I'm talking about in this video. This book. Eve is the youngest sister. Essentially what happens is Eve has had a slew of failed businesses and passions that she's taken forth, and her parents have basically sat her down and said, hey, you are going to be cut off from your trust fund and you are required to move out until you can prove to us that you can go out and act like an adult. So in a fit of sadness, she basically drives and drives until she runs into this bed and breakfast that's offering a cooking job. And she goes in, runs into this interview, has a bad time, then accidentally runs over the B&B owner, Jacob, and then she's like, well, now I have to stay and take care of things till he can get better. So basically they are forced to live together and work together, and romance ensues from there. Jacob is on the autistic spectrum, so do keep that in mind. Certain things are in here that are explored there. But yeah, I'm just gonna say it. Eve Brown, you're my favorite. You're my favorite. Jacob, I love you. I love it. We've got a lot of grumpy ex-Sunshine in this. He does call her Sunshine at some point. Eve is a music lover. Love that for me. Love that. So yeah, I don't know if I have a lot to say on these, but it goes 5, 4.75, and then 5. I recommend all of them, and then the little epilogue at the end of Eve Brown kind of wraps it up very nicely. So I'm ready to dive into Talia Hibbert's backlist and see what else I can grab from her. Then I read another queer nonfiction. That's Queer Villains of Myth and Legend by Dan Jones. I listened to this one on audiobook. I just wanted another quick audiobook to listen to while I was still in the nonfiction audiobook mood. This one essentially just explores, like it said, queer villains of myth and legend. So it follows fictional characters and it follows real life, mythology and deities and people who are behind these characters and their creation. And it's just a cutesy fun time. It talks about everyone from Ursula and Jennifer from Jennifer's Body to Baphomet and the Minotaur and Medusa and all that. So if you're interested in that, it's a fun little interesting audiobook. I will say, the author who reads this kind of reads like a very dry British lecturer. So you've got this very obviously intended to be campy, funny language with some of these things written down in here. And it's very read at a very dry, flat tone. So if you're listening to it, just keep that in mind. But it's I don't know what it looks like in real life. I don't have the physical copy, although I kind of want to get a physical copy for myself. But it's only 226 pages, so it's a relatively short book and relatively short listen, depending on what you're looking for. So, add that to your list. It would probably be really good for spooky season. Then the last book I consumed this month physically was Exes and Foes by Amanda Woody. So this book was a 4.5 star. And this one also is going to be in a reading vlog that's coming sometime in a couple weeks for reading my physical TBR. So you'll see it, I don't know how soon that'll be, but I won't talk too much about it necessarily here. So Exes and Foes follows Emma and Caleb, who were once best friends as kids, but essentially Emma called it quits on their friendship, and now 4 years later, they have come to a crossroads where they both are in love or are very much interested in the same person, and that is Juliet. And in order to keep things there, they call a competition to see whoever Juliet kisses first will get the person. So yeah, and you know, romance, trauma, sadness, all the emotions ensue from there as they are trying to get them. As you read the back, you're never quite sure if this is a love triangle of best friends to enemies to lovers or a throuple situation. So I will let you go forth and find out here. The only reason it wasn't a 5-star for me is because it kind of felt like the author kept throwing like wrench in their plan after another, like bad things, just frustration, things kept happening to them, and I was like, eventually I'm like, can they not catch a break? I don't love it when you just throw pain after pain after pain for to a character. Sometimes I just need a little levity, and that's what happened. But did I tear up? Did I cry a little reading this? Yes. Do check trigger warnings. There's a lot about parental neglect, abandonment, and just mistreatment in here, so do keep that in mind. There's also a slight bit of homophobia on part of some antagonistic characters. It's not a lot in there, but it is in there, so keep that in mind. But this one, do recommend if you're looking for like a YA queer romance with a little more depth to it. And those were all of the books I read in the month of August. And I have started on my September TBR, although we're barely into it because it's only September 2nd as I am filming this. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read in the month of August. What will you be reading in September? And what would you like me to be talking about next?